Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday Night Conversations. We are delighted this evening to have Gina Mazza and Laura George with us from the Peace Pentagon to really dive deep into wow, this is going to be a great evening. I'm really looking forward to it. So my name is Bob Warner, along with my beloved Noelle Marshall, who's behind the scenes tonight, we call ourselves Light Partners. Partnering with light to serve our one sacred life. And we are stewards of the Co-Creators Convergence. And as I said, very, very happy to be here every Thursday night with the amazing people that are changing the world. And we're in for a real trip this evening. Some of you are new to the Co-Creators Convergence. And so I'm going to play a little 1-minute introduction to what our community is about. We're not a membership organization or anything like that. It is a community of co-creators, and learn more about it. We're going to show you a little quick video. Stand by. Again, welcome everyone. That's a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence. If you would like to get our monthly newsletter, which is basically an announcement of all the co-creators conversationalists that we're going to have in the following month, please put your name and your email address in the chat, and we'll be sure and put you on the mailing list for that. So we just send out one mailing per. So what an exciting evening we're going to have this evening with Laura George, Reverend Laura George, talking about the shifting Godhead and the law of gender. And we're going to have Gina make the introductions, because Gina is the one that recommended and is going to be hosting this time together with Laura. Gina is an award-winning journalist, a poet, author of 3 books in the personal growth category, and she runs a business to help others, specifically writers, bring forth their creative expression, particularly in the spirituality, consciousness, and wellness space. Her company's services include ghostwriting, editing, publishing, consulting, book promotion, and branding. She is a word provocateur and a creative alchemist. And for Noelle and I, she is a dear, dear soul sister. We first met Gina in 2015 at the Building the New World conference at Radford University. We also met Laura for the first time. And soon thereafter, all 4 of us were at the Peace Pentagon in Independence, Virginia. And soon after that, Noelle and I traveled with Gina to Dominar, the community of the future that's in northern Italy. And Laura's been there as well. It's been very influential in the Oracle Institute and in the Peace Pentagon. So we also met Laura at the same time and broke bread at the Peace Pentagon in her home there in the community of light, the Valley of Light. And since we've supported the mission of the Oracle Institute and the Peace Pentagon and participated in many events at the Peace Pentagon and facilitated events at the Peace Pentagon. So we have a real heart connection to that mission, and what's being accomplished has been, is, and will be accomplished by the Oracle Institute and the Peace Pentagon. So I am going to turn the magic talking stick over to Gina, who will introduce Laura more formally and personally. And I will fade out of the picture. And we look forward to an amazing presentation, and particularly to comments, questions, and dialogue in the latter part of this time together this evening. We do have people that are watching on Facebook Live. We welcome all of you on the many different Facebook sites that we're on this evening. If you are on the Co-Creators Convergence Facebook page, please put any comments that you have in the post there. Just comment there and we'll bring them over and put them in the chat so that Gina and Laura have a chance to interact with you in that way. So with that, Gina, welcome Laura. Gina, please take it away. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for that beautiful recitation of our very full lives together. It's when I hear you go through all of it, it's like we've done a lot in the few years that we've known each other. So thank you, and Noelle, who's off camera right now, but thank you both for just carrying the mantle of CCC and all that you do for so many people. I think that you two are really the embodiment of light workers. I think that your name, Light Partners, is perfect because you show us how it's done. And you truly make a difference in the world. So thanks for all you do. And everyone here tonight, yeah, I'm thinking that we're going to be in for a pretty wild ride. And I'm really, it's really an honor to be co-hosting. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce my friend, colleague, and yes, dear soul sister, Reverend Laura George. For those of you who don't yet know Laura, get ready because you're in the presence of one powerhouse human being. Laura is a reverend, she's a lawyer, and she's the executive director of the Oracle Institute. The Oracle Institute is an educational charity located in Independence, Virginia, and I have had the pleasure of being there a number of times, and it's such a beautiful place right along the New River, really a magical place, honestly. Oracle is a think tank as well. That studies the nexus between religion, politics, human rights, and conscious evolution. And it also operates as a spirituality school, an award-winning publishing house, which is, again, tonight we'll be talking a little bit more about that with Laura's books. Her publishing house is called Oracle Press, and also a global peace practice. So Oracle is also headquartered at the Peace Pentagon, which is a training and retreat center for pluralistic programs and social justice campaigns. And the Peace Pentagon in itself is just a marvel, just how it's come together. And, you know, the way that Laura has almost single-handedly envisioned and brought this to life is really spectacular. And if you're ever in the area of Virginia, it's really worth a trip to go and check it out. The Peace Pentagon also serves the Valley of Light community and the Oracle Temple, which is an esoteric church. Laura is also a member of the Evolutionary Leaders and the author of 3 award-winning books that we're going to be talking about here in a minute. So welcome, Laura.
It's a privilege to be with you, Gina, and with Bob and Noelle. And yes, we've had many adventures together and we're about to have another one.
We are. You know, I always say that I get worn out just thinking about everything that you've done over the years with the Oracle Institute and everything else that you have going on. And it's really amazing that in the midst of all of that, that you found time to write not 1, not 2, but 3 books. Just major kudos for that, because I know it's not easy and your books are incredible. So just big congratulations on that. The one we're going to be talking about tonight is The Light, the one that's newly released. But before we do, Laura, you were going to take us through just a really brief centering meditation. I thought as a precursor to that, wanted to just ask you to speak just for a few minutes about where I think the story of these 3 books began for you, which was somewhere around 2001, if I recall.
It was actually 9/11, which was a just tumultuous, life-altering, gut-wrenching event for many people. And for me, it was a wake-up call. I was already studying religion and philosophy and theosophy as a hobby, if you can call religion a hobby. And after 9/11, it just burst forward in my meditations that I had to dedicate my life to figuring out why we still seem to be operating under misconceptions about the Godhead. For me, it wasn't evolving quickly enough. And so the 3 books in the Oracle trilogy all address in different ways how we move forward. So the truth is actually about the past. It's entitled The Truth About the 5 Primary Religions. The love is, the full title is The Love of the 5th Spiritual Paradigm. That's the present. That's where we are right now in what I call the great cusp, this crazy moment of turmoil where everyone is confused and disillusioned, and yet internally knowing something new is about to come. And then the most intimidating book was The Light and the New Human, because that's about our future. But that's a decade right.
Yeah, and it's the most provocative as well, and prophetic in some ways. So just super excited to get into it. But first, let's do our centering, and then we can carry on from there.
Okay. So for those who don't know me, I'm a little obsessed with pentagons and pentagrams and the number 5, and you'll soon know why. But for this little centering meditation, I would like everyone to close their eyes, and I would like you to envision that very famous Leonardo da Vinci, Vitruvian Man drawing. And I want you to picture that drawing, which we typically see on this old parchment, right? This very old paper. And I want you to envision that paper becoming blue. It's a blue piece of paper. And that Vitruvian Man is set against a blue backdrop. And I want you to picture him now moving and floating over above your left shoulder. Now I want you to picture a Vitruvian woman and imagine her backdrop as being pink. And let her float over on top of your right shoulder. Now picture both of these images, the Vitruvian Man and the Vitruvian woman, who represent the perfect man and woman, the perfect soul, the perfect embodiment of the masculine and the feminine. I want you to imagine them now floating up past your ears to the top of your head, over your crown chakra. And I would like you to picture them merging. This man and this woman set against a pentagram, merging. And when that blue and pink come together, you get purple. And then I want you to imagine this perfect blending of masculine and feminine energy coming through your crown chakra, down into your heart space, and just exploding within you, because that's what we all have. We all have a masculine side and a feminine side. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. That which I feel is the key to the paradigm shift. So shall we begin?
Yeah, so the light is definitely a very sophisticated examination of all of these various aspects of being human. There's the social, the scientific, the spiritual, all of our belief systems, and of course, as you're saying, the what you call the genderful or genderless concepts of the deity. When I read your book, I was just really sort of stunned about just how well it articulates that we're in the midst of this massive paradigm shift that a lot of people are trying to put words to. And when you mention that it's a shift that humanity likely hasn't been through in over 2,000 years, and when those paradigm shifts happen, our explanation or our expression of the Godhead or God changes. And it was just like an aha moment for me of like, yeah, this is what has given rise to this period of intense spiritual chaos that plays itself out in all the forms, politically, scientifically, community-wise, nation states, all of it. So I just think that what you've written is astoundingly relevant to what is happening right now in our country and in the world. And so I know you have a really in-depth presentation to share with us. So let's do that next.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to share screen. And Gina's right. We're going to be talking about what we call at the Oracle Institute, the trickle-down deity theory. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So these are the covers of the 3 books. We're going to be focusing on The Light tonight, which is the last installment of the trilogy. And we are going to start with some definitions, because what Gina said is exactly how we perceive the shifting of paradigms. It's really that when the Godhead shifts, the paradigm shifts. So the first paradigm, we call this the period pre-Big Bang. This is when all was one. This is before any separation. It was a period of primordial oneness. For those of you who like the Christian mythology, you could also think of this era as the Garden of Eden, that it predates separation. Then we move into the second spiritual paradigm, and this is when humans began to form belief systems about God. And this was the longest lived paradigm. I want to point that out. And this was the era of the Great Mother. And all our early ancestors believed in a female deity, logically flowing from the fact that women are the ones who give birth. So this era lasted a very long time, until the advent of the age of agriculture, when the Godhead shifted into polytheism. That can be tied easily, and most historians agree, and most anthropologists agree, that it was when we entered the age of agriculture and the division of labor started to come in, that these male and female roles started to separate. Before, we were all herders and or hunters and gatherers, and later we became herders, and we're growing crops, and civilizations are arising. At that point, surpluses arise, and then the classes start coming in, the caste system with the merchant class and ruling class and the priestly caste. So that's what was happening during the third paradigm. This is also the era of all the pantheons, from the Sumerians all the way to the Hindus. And Hinduism is the only religion from this era which survived. And there are reasons for that, which I talk about in The Truth, because all the rest went in our history books, or they went into literature books, studying Zeus and Hera and all the pantheons. But then what came next was the fourth spiritual paradigm. And this is when God went male. And it's as though people returned to monotheism, but didn't quite yet have the sophistication to envision a Godhead that was both genderful or genderless. So I call this the era of daddy deism. And this is where we've been for the last 2,000 years. We've basically been stuck in daddy deism, which brought us all sorts of incredible technology and industrial growth, and we were prizing, intellect and left brain over right brain wisdom during this time. But what's happening now is the sacred feminine is returning, as she must, because there will be no birthing this fifth spiritual paradigm without her. So at Oracle, we call this the trickle-down deity theory, that your view of the world is necessarily driven by your view of God. And this is a truism that many people have come to at this point. So we are looking forward to this shift coming through in earnest. So the law of gender is described in my favorite, all-time favorite esoteric book, which is called The Kybalion. And that book has 7 laws in it. The ultimate one being that all is the mind of God. So that's the law of mentalism. But you can see the law of gender is the first one. And these laws are nested, they're holarchical. And what I write in the book is that, unfortunately, we have yet to even master this one. This is the most elementary lesson, that this plane, the earth plane, is gendered. There's a quote from the Kybalion: everything Our gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. The masculine principle corresponds to the objective, conscious mind. The feminine principle corresponds to the subjective, subconscious mind. The I represents the masculine aspect of being, and the me represents the feminine aspect of becoming. And that's why I led us in that little meditation, having a blue man on our left shoulder, our logic brain, the left side, and this pink woman on our right. My other path that I very much both study and suggest that others do as well is the Kabbalah. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. It would be the Gnostic Kabbalah. And inherent in this system are the feminine and masculine aspects, because you can see quite directly the pillars. So in the Christian Kabbalah, which adds a sephiro with Hodayat there for the, which actually represents the enlightened one, reaching total gnosis, which is what Jesus did in this tradition. This model is a very sophisticated one, and we don't have time to go into it all, but if you'll notice, the bottom sephiro is Malkut, that's the earth plane. So in this model, not only are they talking about, the masters talking about reaching higher levels of the ethereal plane, it also helps us understand that there are billions of worlds. There are all sorts of interdimensional aspects. And in this model, we see that it actually repeats. The masters of the Kabbalah say that even once you reach Keter, which is the crown and the ultimate Godhead, you're just going to start another round of what I call the God game. So the other thing I do in the book is I talk about these models, trying to determine why is humanity on Earth moving at what seems such a slow pace? I mean, the most obvious answer is, I call it the lingering lizard brain theory, just that evolution itself is a very slow and tedious process. But there are other theories that I go into in the light. We don't have time to go into them tonight, but it would be really good if those of us who are seeking greater levels of awareness and even enlightenment start pondering how to help our brothers and sisters along who are at a stage of development where they're accepting old stories, old mythology, and old ways of looking at the world, which really aren't going to help us progress. So I'm going to touch on the waves of feminism. I'm going to have to move fast because I know we want to have a discussion. The first wave of feminism I date from 1850 to 1940. And this came in with the Ohio Women's Rights Convention is where I started. There was a very famous speech made by Sojourner Truth, who asked, "Ain't I a woman?" And she was coming from two perspectives, both the feminine and as an American. Another big event was Julia Ward Howe's Mother's Day Proclamation, which brings tears to my eyes every time I read it. And she wrote it after the Civil War. And it again was the beginning of the law of gender coming forth in the United States in a robust manner. And she basically says, in the name of womanhood and all humanity, women need to have a Congress to talk about the affairs that men seem to not be able to resolve. Then we get the 19th Amendment in 1920, and women have only been voting in this country for roughly 100 years, which is remarkable when you really pause to think about it. Women have just recently won the right to vote in some other nations, mostly Muslim, which is even more shocking. And women are still prevented from voting in certain places. Usually, even if they have the right to vote, it's a matter of a cultural blockage and intimidation. So one of the big things that also happened during this era was Planned Parenthood came into being, earlier known as the American Birth Control League. During this wave of feminism, the law of gender starts getting anchored even more. Now we're in the 1940s through 1970. And there was a runaway bestseller, The Feminine Mystique. I recommend that every woman read this book to first off appreciate where we were about 60 years ago, and also what our mothers and grandmothers were contending with. I mean, now it's starting to get personal, right? There was also a prior book called The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, a very famous philosopher. And she says, when we abolish the slavery of half of humanity, together with the whole system of hypocrisy that implies, then the division of humanity will reveal its genuine significance, and the human couple will find its true form. The truth is that man and wife together undergo the oppression of an institution they did not create. If it is asserted that men oppress women, the husband is indignant. But the fact is that it is the masculine code, the society developed by males and in their interest, that has established women's situation in a form that is at present a source of torment for both. We will pose the problem of feminine destiny quite differently. We will situate a woman in a world of values, and we will lend her behavior a dimension of freedom. We think she has to choose between the affirmation of her transcendence and her alienation as subject, but she is not the plaything of contradictory drives. She devises solutions that have an ethical hierarchy among them. So at multiple levels, the law of gender was coming in during this 30-year period. The birth control pill became available in 1950. Women started attending college at a higher rate. Family size started shrinking, and that meant more freedom for women. And then we start getting the Equal Pay Act, EEOC, the Civil Rights Act of '64. So things were really cooking. And by 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut struck down all the contraception bans that the states had passed. That was a big deal because a lot of the states were still banning it. This is also the era of NOW coming into fore, and also NARAL. In the third wave, from 1970 to 2000, the law of gender spread even more. So now we've got Bella Abzug in Congress. She very famously quips, woman's place is in the house. The ERA gets introduced, finally passes Congress, but it was actually the first wave feminists who introduced it. It took that long. Then of course we got Roe v. Wade. I'm going to talk about that a little more later. And then more, because we didn't have ERA, more federal acts start passing. Pregnancy discrimination, medical care leave. Sandra Day O'Connor's appointment in 1981, that was a huge deal. First woman on the Supreme Court. And then culturally, things were really exploding. I remember when Helen Reddy's song, I Am Woman, came out. I think I would have been about 10 years old. Gloria Steinem starts Ms. Magazine. I mean, all these cultural icons are leading the way, promoting the law of gender. I just want to point out that this is when the counter-evolutionary force reared its ugly head. This is when we get the moral majority and Phyllis Schlafly. And this was the beginning of a long delay for the law of gender, because these people worked hard and they organized, and they eventually did whittle away the rights of Roe v. Wade. In the fourth wave, which is just ending, because remember, I love the number 5. We're gonna have to end up with 5. Things really exploded again. So this is where we get the lifting of the ban on transgender service members. We get same-sex marriage as the law of the land. And it's global. It's not just here. So 30 countries now have same-sex marriage. Some of them are still exceedingly homophobic. Some of them assess the death penalty. They're all Muslim nations. Barack Obama gets elected, and that ties in with the law of gender in the sense of polarity, which is a similar concept. Not acknowledging polarity is like not acknowledging the genders, and also not usurping it is like not usurping gender-based discrimination. So we get Nancy Pelosi, and then we get the largest march in human history in 2017 as a reaction to Donald Trump being elected. This was huge. We know it was the largest march in human history. It was global, and then it launches the Me Too movement. So we can see as feminism continues to grow, it's becoming more and more part of our culture. You know, now we can easily say that over half of our country is feminist. All right, so here we are at the fifth wave. This is where we are right now. If we can anchor the law of gender, we will shift the paradigm, and then everything will change. I wanted to mention that gender fluidity and non-binary gender is another indication that the law of gender is being assimilated and coming into the collective consciousness. Transgender rights as well. And we see women gaining both financial and political power. So things really are cooking. And despite the reversal of Roe v. Wade, I think the midterm elections indicate we're headed in the right direction again. Really quickly on the ERA, it has been held up on procedural technicalities that are mind-blowing. Virginia did ratify it. We needed a 38th state. And the National Archivist was all set to publish the ERA when he got a letter from Bill Barr, who is our former Attorney General. It is literally being held up because of former Attorney General Bill Barr's letter indicating that he takes exception with two potential technicalities. One of them is that 5 states rescinded their ratification, but there's a Supreme Court case on point that says once a yes, always a yes with regard to constitutional amendment. So that argument is a red herring. The other argument is that for some ungodly reason, the drafters of the ERA put a 7-year time limit for its ratification in the preamble of the statute. This again is a technicality. It's not part of the actual law. Preambles are not considered part of actual statutes. However, that's all Barr needed to block it. So I just want to point out that if our new Attorney General, God bless this guy, he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, Merrick Garland, he could literally write a letter tomorrow to the National Archivist and we would have the ERA. I wanted to point out that some states have their own version of ERA. Some of them do this outright with an equivalent statute. 16 states have it. 10 use the due process protection for, or right now, attempting to pass ERAs. But you can see from this map, it's a patchwork again of female protection and promoting the law of gender. So take a look at this map. The blue states basically do have ERAs. And the yellow ones, these gold ones, have a pretty good level of protection. This map, we just updated after the midterms because things changed. So this map is showing where the state of abortion is today. Abortion is a good indication of where we are with the law of gender and the shifting Godhead, because obviously if women don't have bodily autonomy, we can't really be talking about a world in which the Godhead is going to be viewed as genderful or genderless. So we've got 14 states now with total bans. Wisconsin is funny because they didn't actually have a trigger ban. This old law never went off the books. These other ones down here are trigger bans, which were specially drafted in the event that Roe would be reversed. You can see they're on appeal right now. And we included North Carolina simply because it's sort of a restrictive date, but you can see where we are with this. Basically, it's half the country. It's 25 states are not acknowledging female bodily sovereignty. The midterms just brought us some really great news. I'll just briefly mention that the midterm wins include constitutional amendments and also rejections of amendments that would have taken rights away. And we know that national polls show that this country is absolutely pro-choice. So getting back into the book a little, there's a chapter on the spectrum of consciousness, and we don't have time to go into it, but this is a model that has basically overtaken what many of us took either in high school or college, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That model it's still taught, but this model is more refined. And basically, it's a model which takes that very tippy top of the pyramid, self-actualization, and breaks it down into finer categories so that both people can self-chart themselves, which I recommend everybody do. And it also helps us understand our culture at large and the culture wars. Basically, the culture war is taking place between the stage 4 orange we meme and the stage 6 green meme. This is the culture war. So I do go into this at great length in the book. For those of you who want to understand why the polarization is so extreme and why it may be so extreme, one side is actually going to have to win and one side's actually going to have to lose. We may not be in a situation where there's enough common ground. And remember, let me flip back here for a second. Here's the law of polarity. It is 4 laws removed from the law of gender. And this is a reality on the earth plane that many in the New Age movement don't like talking about. I think during the discussion, we should hit this. Everybody loves talking about cause and effect, which is basically karma, but polarity, a lot of new thought people think that somehow dealing with polarity is a bad thing. No, light masters know about polarity. So let's move to this slide because I want to move things along. This is basically a pyramidal version of the spiral dynamics chart. And this is the realm of the new human. In the book, I give credit, if we want to put it that way, to stage 6 humans and higher as falling within the definition of a new human, because these are people who absolutely have a pluralistic view of the world. So we're talking way beyond tolerating those who look different or practice a different religion, or, you know, we're way beyond toleration at this point. Like this is the stage where people really accept and enjoy diversity, really see that the fabric of the future is unity in diversity. They're not afraid of it. And they want to see more. And again, I go into these stages in a little more detail, or a lot more detail in the book, but just know that this is basically the realm. And there are more arriving every day. So here's the bad news, however, because many people are taking off following the evolutionary impulse, while others are afraid of what's coming and regressing, the spiral is collapsing, we're ending up with this God gap. And I write about this in the book. So right now we're living in what I call a great cusp. This is the period of chaos that always attends a paradigm shift. Like there's no getting through this without a lot of pain, because you've got both an old and a new belief system vying for supremacy, and the old order will go down fighting to the death. I mean, think about the Roman Empire falling and the end of the polytheistic third paradigm ushering in Christianity. I mean, that was a tumultuous time, which led to the Dark Ages, So this God gap is what's very dangerous right now. And you can see what I meant about polarity. This stage 5 yellow meme basically is our old middle class, which is being winnowed out. And going back to this slide really fast, what's happening is that old-fashioned nationalists, I mean, that's how I remember my grandparents, you know, this is the great generation. These are the guys who fought World War II for us. Well, in the new millennium, these guys are under stress. They're afraid of the other. So your average red, white, and blue nationalist is now dropping down a stage because of fear and becoming a neo-nationalist and so forth. That's what's happened in our middle class here because of money worries and the fact that, you know, pay is not keeping pace with inflation, all those sorts of stresses. Well, now they're becoming more fundamentalist and black and white in their thinking. So now they're worried about the other as well. So the God gap is the Greens are going forward and some of these other stages are falling behind. And that is always what happens in a paradigm shift as well during a great cusp. Those who are afraid of the future start clinging to an old world that didn't even really exist except in their fantasy memories. And those who aren't afraid and are seeking the light are ready to take off. And this is the moment we find ourselves in. I just want to finish by plugging our Women of Faith and Fury campaign. We are part of the Abortion Network, and this is through our church, Oracle Temple. We're surrounded by Appalachian states where abortion is banned or heavily restricted. So we're claiming sanctuary status for our campus. And we have started an abortion fund, and we are prepared to assist women who need to come here from other states. We also wish to file a federal lawsuit. There's a checkerboard pattern of lawsuits right now. The very first to file was a rabbi in Florida who we've become friends with. He is unbelievably awesome, Rabbi Barry Silver. And his case will probably be the first one heard. It's in Florida and he's taken on DeSantis. But the problem with doing a patchwork state by state approach, obviously, is that we don't want the United States to continue to look like this. We want people to be able to cross state lines and not be afraid if they have a medical emergency while pregnant that their life is in danger. So if you are an attorney and you're interested, please contact me. And also, this campaign is open to atheists as well, because obviously the Supreme Court made this decision based on a fundamentalist view of Christianity, that life begins at conception, and atheists don't believe that a fetus is ensouled because they don't believe humans are ensouled. So this is a perfect campaign to bring in our atheist friends, because the whole reasoning, even in Roe v. Wade or any of these faith-based arguments, is going to make no sense to them and makes no sense to us either. And then if you are seeking an esoteric church, we invite you to join Oracle Temple. And that's the end of this presentation. I just want to point out that these books really are a roadmap for those of you who are serious about your spiritual journey and seeking just some literature that can help you get there. They're jam-packed books, as Gina said, and really excited to be able to share this information that we've been gathering for, I guess, 20 years now at the Oracle Institute.
Wow. Thank you, Laura. Amazing stuff, and still just scratching the surface of what you've written about.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I mean, there's a chapter on physics in there, as well as the metaphysics, because that's part of the paradigm shift too, that finally this merger of science and spirituality, it's so exciting. So exciting. The old reductionist model is out, holism is in, scientists agree. It's a really exciting time.
It's an exciting time, and it's a very tenuous and disturbing time for a lot of people. And I would love to start with the topic of polarity, because I do think that that is such a critical piece of what's happening right now. And it's also the piece that I really resonated a lot with when I read your book, when you were talking about, you know, that you cannot transmute that which you don't acknowledge or can't see. And I think it was the chapter very provocatively titled Gandhi versus Hitler, right? So you're talking about the polarity. So why don't we start with just a few terms? Because again, you know, you have a lot of research in your book, but you also have some of your own terms that you use. So you talk about team light and team dark. And definitely Team Light is pro-life evolution, right? And Team Dark is anti-evolution, or what I like to refer to as like entropy, right? They're not for forward movement, but it's interesting that you say that they both have the same goal, right? So talk about that a little bit. I think it's, it's something that I had to read a couple times because I wanted to understand your interpretation of that.
So I use the story of Lucifer in the book to sort of set this up. Lucifer being the first creation, and this is of course mythology, but the first creation of God. And Lucifer basically gets his nose out of joint when God creates Archangel Michael, and then gives the plum job of hanging out in heaven and guarding heaven to Michael, and sends first son Lucifer down to caretake us, which he perceives as completely inferior and secondary. And I make the joke, it's like telling the firstborn that you got to take out the trash while the secondborn gets to get the fun chores. Anyway, the point of the story though really is that why is Lucifer pissed off in the myth? And the reason he's pissed off is because he's not with God anymore. He then eventually decides to completely go apeshit and lead a rebellion. But the reason he's upset is because he's lost that closeness. So the point I make in the book is that everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants unity. Deep down, this primordial desire, drive, yearning to go home. And the difference between Team Light and Team Dark, as far as I'm concerned, is only this one thing. That Team Light is willing to follow the rules, I call it the rules of the God game, which basically are the rules of evolution, that it is a slow and tedious process, that there are days where, the ascent is easy and days where we take a tumble and we have to deal with the reality of the earth plane. But Team Dark, on the other hand, will do anything to win the God game, anything to go home. So they will slash, they will burn, they will kill, they will anything. So the difference really is that the ends justify the means to Team Dark, whereas Team Light is going to play the game for everyone. By the end of the book, I'm using the term Team Human. Mm-hmm. So polarity, the Gandhi versus Hitler chapter is a really important read for those who think you can ignore polarity or you can ignore evil. Many people don't know that Gandhi wrote Hitler and attempted to appeal to Hitler's higher self in the hope of ending the Holocaust. Likewise, Gandhi published articles where he implored the Jews to be more passive, because if they were to adopt his nonviolent satyagraha techniques, that they would eventually win. Not win, but be victorious in the sense that that would end the Holocaust. So neither one of those notions by Gandhi is true. When you're dealing with an opponent as ruthless as a Hitler, appealing to their good side isn't going to work. So I talk about in the book how it definitely worked with the British. That was basically a level 4, level 5 culture. And Gandhi took the high road, and he basically guilted the British into giving India back to those people, the people who were indigenous. That's not going to work with a cutthroat dictator. And likewise, submitting yourself over and over again to the knife en masse isn't going to change a dictator's mind either, one that is that ruthless. So basically in the book, I point out that you need to know, first off, who your opponent is. You need to chart them. That's why knowing the spectrum is so important. And that research is used all over the world now. I mean, every marketing person who's worth his salt knows spiral dynamics, because when you're designing an ad, you got to know what motivates people. So similarly, if you're in a battle, especially a battle for the heart and soul of a nation, you better know where your opponent's coming from and how he can trigger people on the spectrum in different ways. So yeah, polarity is really important. And all light masters, I've got quotes from all of our spiritual heroes in there about polarity and dealing with it in a realistic manner. So yeah, I can't underscore that enough, because that's a real new age mistargeted, what's the right way of putting it? It's just so naive. And every esoteric path, a true path, that's, you know, well-worn path to enlightenment, this is a stage of study that all novitiates go through. Maybe not initiates, but novitiates. And in the olden days, they weren't allowed to progress in the mystery schools until they understood polarity.
Yeah, yeah, and you and I have talked about, you know, the New Age died a long time ago, along with a lot of its teachings. They're not really relevant anymore. Another one is that you mentioned in the book is the opposite of love is not fear, right?
Right. That's
Um,
another. That is so, oh my goodness. Yeah, the New Age movement really convinced people, well, first off, that, you know, evil is an illusion. Let's just ignore it. Or if it exists, you know, if I let it into my sphere, it could contaminate me, like some warped view of law of attraction. But yes, this is an even bigger one. And that's why the Kabbalion is such a good book. The opposite of love is hate. The opposite of fear is courage. These are
Right.
continuums. And if you don't understand this, how can you possibly deal with it in the moment when you're dealing with an adversary, when you're dealing with someone who wants to do harm? The other reason that this is dangerous for light workers is because, yeah, not only can you not change what you don't understand, but you really, it's really a projection. That's what I want to say. This is really a projection of the stage 6 meme. I can't tell you, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said to me, Dick Cheney is fear-based, let's use Dick Cheney. A man ain't afraid of nothing, okay? Okay, this is a projection for those who don't want to deal with fear, that they want to put their fear onto others. So no, I mean, when in doubt, I always go Star Wars, right? So for every Yoda, there's a Darth Vader. I mean, when you get to that level of light masters and dark lords, it becomes evident that fear just is not in the equation. So anyway, fear is something that you drop as you drop ego, is really what the model shows. That the more advanced you become in terms of your selflessness and your willingness to assist humanity and your desire and an obsession with helping humanity, both ego starts to dissipate and fear, because you're aligned with the light.
Yeah, again, just so relevant for what's happening right now in the world, because it does feel like spiritual warfare. It feels like a battle between dark and light. And so you mentioned knowing your opponent, a little bit of Sun Tzu, Art of War there, right?
Yeah.
What else can you kind of tell us to soothe our souls here about, like, what to do about this? I mean, we're at this crescendo point. The polarity is more pronounced than ever at this moment in time. How do we possibly bring ourselves back together? How do we possibly circumvent that? Or is it just another piece of evolution that we have to live through?
If we're really, really close to the paradigm shift, there won't be any room for negotiation. I need to say it that bluntly. If we're not close to it yet, we'll find some common ground and we'll negotiate for a while. But eventually, when the Godhead shifts, that means a completely different way of viewing both the earth and the ethereal plane. And at that point, that means those of us who are looking into the future will have won, in the sense that there's a whole new belief system that's predominating. So Biden is a good example of, well, let me go here. So in the book, I've got 2 drawings of pendulums. So one way of dealing with polarity is you've got these 2 extremes, and you want the pendulum to slowly slow down and reach an equilibrium point. So for me, Biden has bought us some time. I mean, he's this gentle old soul to me. This is my opinion of Biden, who's, you know, an old school politician. He grew up in an era where polarity wasn't as extreme. I mean, he lived through the Newt Gingrich years too, but I mean, Biden remembers what it means to negotiate and to reach a mediated point that you don't get everything you want, but everybody gets something, you know, gets something they want. I mean, that was classic politics. But with a paradigm shift, there's really no negotiation to be had. And I'll use the Hitler and Gandhi analogy again. How could Hitler and Gandhi have ever reached a solution as to the Holocaust? I mean, it's just not. Hitler wanted to wipe out the Jews. Hitler was a megalomaniac who wanted to take over Europe and beyond. So you get to the point where when there is no common ground, the only way to end polarity is back to the pendulum. One side's just going to swing and a new cycle is going to start. I mean, you're just going to go. Whoosh. And that's what happened during the last paradigm shift when Jesus became God. And the Abrahamic religions basically took over as the theosophical view of the Godhead. We ended up with so much chaos until things died down. And now we're dealing with the aftermath of patriarchy, as everybody listening knows. I mean,
Right.
you just can't get forward without wisdom. Intellect and wisdom are two different things. You can have geniuses who don't know how to, you know, save humanity.
And so because this third book in the trilogy is about the future, and I look at the spiritual paradigms that you spell out in the book, I can't help but wonder, what is the sixth paradigm and what are we getting into? And do you have anything to report on about that?
Goodness, the sixth paradigm? I don't know. That, I mean, that's thousands of years probably in the future. We'll be lucky if we make make it into the fifth paradigm. We'll be really fortunate because time is running out. It's not just this sort of academic desire that I have for the sacred feminine to return. I mean, our lives depend on it. I mean, protecting the planet, dealing with every existential threat you can think of. I can relate it back to the Godhead being out of sync and the desire for most of humanity now. And that's good news that most of us, I really believe this, most people on the planet are ready for the shift. Mm-hmm. We outnumber those who are afraid of it. We outnumber those who are actively trying to thwart it. I'll tell you also what it doesn't look like. There's another crazy new age concept called the fifth dimension that we're all gonna, I call it the reverse rapture in the book. I poke fun at it because what new agers are calling the fifth dimension that we're somehow gonna magically ascend to, like we were gonna magically ascend after December 12th or December 21st, 2012. Mm-hmm. All they're describing is a heightened state of morality and the level of compassion that exists once you reach a certain level on the spectrum of consciousness. So it's not this new place. It is our just enhanced, upgraded, new human treatment of one another. That's the fifth paradigm. And in terms of dimensions, you know, that has to do with where you travel in the mystic realm, right? Mm-hmm. But no, we're not about to all just like poof into another dimension. That's another new age silliness.
Yeah, some say that it is just a state of consciousness, that there's a bifurcation of worlds happening and that it doesn't look any different on the external, but it's very different in terms of how the lived experience is happening for the individual based on their level of consciousness.
Right. So again, that is a description of a higher state of being, not another plane, not another dimension, right?
Exactly.
In the term, in the way that scientists use that term. So, and we can have that tomorrow if enough people wake up. So at Oracle, we like to say, you know, it's both perfecting yourself and not waiting until you're perfect to go out and help others, because that's another one of those new age beliefs that makes me crazy, is that you can't help the world until you've helped yourself sufficiently. And basically it's an excuse to just focus on yourself. So it's both and. You need to both work on your spiritual path and do what you're capable of doing for others. And I say in the light, if you've experienced bliss once, you're qualified, you're deputized. Go out there and help promote the future, help people who are afraid not be afraid to the extent possible. And it is possible, but it takes work. It takes one-on-one conversation, and it takes compassion, really, because we've all been in situations where we've been afraid. So we know what it's like to be afraid of something unknown. Change is scary, but new humans are ready, and new humans have the duty to assist those who are afraid move into the future.
And
otherwise we're going down.
yeah, and it's an inside job, right? Like you all of these things we're talking about are things that we find within ourselves, but not because we're focused on ourselves. It's really, kind of ironically that we're not focused on ourselves when we start to feel that connection with others and something, working towards something greater. I wonder if you would say that this fifth paradigm is, speaking of the pendulum, it's almost like that had its height in the 80s, like the greed decade, where everybody was just kind of me. And now there's sort of a denouement of it happening with that, where we're starting to understand that we need to be more integrated with that. It's not all about me. It is more about, like you said, time is a waste, and like we have to really get our act together. Do you see that in this fifth paradigm, or not? Because I hear the opposite too, that we're too self-focused, we're too sensitive, we're too we're not as hardened perhaps as previous generations. Like you mentioned that a minute ago about how can you compare to like the World War II the greatest generation, where 18-year-olds were going to war. And so I'm wondering how does that play into the fifth paradigm?
So you had a couple questions in there. So the gentler human that we're seeing, like on college campuses, the people who are really offended by what many of us would consider microaggressions, that's actually, I mean, in one way we can say, okay, grow up, get a tougher skin, deal with reality. Some of these kids were helicopter parented and then bulldoze parented and are ill-equipped to deal with the real world. On the other hand, though, that's a real indication of what we were talking about earlier with the meditation I did, where the masculine and feminine are coming together, and we're seeing a real growth in innate compassion and the ability to express it. And also saying, there's a level of aggression that cannot be tolerated anymore. So it's kind of a two-sided coin. I mean, I applaud these young people, they tend to be younger, who express these sorts of new standards, because it is going to eventually result in a world that is a kinder, gentler place. But during a great cusp, there's you could also say it's naive, because we're dealing with such powerful entrenched forces who are holding basically the power position. So, it's going to take, you got to know, again, you got to know your opponent, you got to know where they are on the spectrum, and you cannot assume that these higher level drives and ways of dealing in the world will work, because they will not work with an opponent who's cutthroat. And that myth is being busted all the time now. Like just what you said, New Age is dead. I mean, Ken Wilber is talking about this. He's also talking about, don't assume everyone who goes second tier all of a sudden is on Team Light. So back to the whole concept of a dark lord. I mean, you've got master players on both sides. So
yeah,
there's a lot.
Questions here in a minute, but I know we could talk about just that topic all night. And before we go to questions, I wanted you to just kind of circle back to, I just had a thought in my mind about the overturning of Roe, like the timing of that, because you were talking about how the pendulum was going in one direction and there was a lot of forward momentum and a lot of female leaders, really coming on strong and making progress in that regard. And then, and of course, I wouldn't say it's a surprise, because we know how the court looks now, and they had, wasn't a surprise that they had been talking about it. But I'm wondering about the timing of it. Like, why did we circle back to it this past year?
On a metaphysical level, I mean, well, on an earth plane level.
On a metaphysical level, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just finish that sentence. On an earth plane level, the other team has been working overtime and using every dirty trick in the book back to polarity and back to understanding. So, I mean, that's why it happened. They've been diligent in their efforts to turn back the clock. And Team Light has just been sort of naively thinking evolution is ever forward. On a metaphysical level, I find it fascinating, the timing, because at first, like, probably every woman and man listening tonight was just in shock, like how the Supreme Court's never taken a right away. It's never happened. You always want a liberal court. I mean, I'm a former attorney, and you want a court to err on the side of permissiveness, never taking a right away. So basically we've got this 5-person fundamentalist Christian church. But on a metaphysical level, the timing of it, I find fascinating, because maybe on a metaphysical level, it was meant to kind of give us a smack in the face and go, okay, are you serious about the shift? Are you really serious? Because this is what going backward looks like, which is also possible, right? I mean, we can have a serious regression, not, a few-year blip, but a serious regression like they had during the medieval era. I think it's meant to kick Team Light in the butt and get us serious about the shift again, and make the point one more time, not just be focusing on ourselves in a narcissistic way. The spiritual narcissism has to end, and it is ending. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what everyone's talking about. This is what the evolutionary leaders talk about all the time. Like, oh my God, we created an army of narcissists instead of an army of activists. So the answer is everybody has to be a radical feminist, basically.
So here's a question from the chat. Do you feel the high rate of youth voters is an encouraging sign?
Oh, absolutely. And the younger, the latest Pew report just came out, and they're tracking this. If things continue to move, the nuns being the NONES, if the rate of the growth of the nuns continues as it has in the last decade, this will not be a Christian nation by 2050. Christians will be a minority.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. That's a big deal. That's 28 years, right? Can I do math? Is it 28 or 18? Yeah, 28. If it slows down, like they ran 3 scenarios, Pew did, even if it slows down, even if rates are diminished, outside 2070, outside. So we're talking within the next generation, maybe you and I will be alive still, let's hope, to witness this, that the United States of America is genuinely going to be a pluralistic society, not just, in terms of our conscious desire. Many of us already are living in that world, this future world, the 5th paradigm, but it's coming, it's happening. And yes, the younger the voter, the more apt they are to be progressive. Absolutely. Unmarried women are more progressive than married women. That's another interesting little
Interesting. Yeah. And I know this is a worldwide human phenomenon that we're talking about, but you do have another one of my favorite chapters where you talk about the secret destiny of America. Can you touch on that for a few minutes? Or buy your book too?
Well,
find a book
I
for that.
bogarted that. I mean, it's kind of how I end the book. So Manly Hall, who was a 33-degree Mason and an amazing mystic, wrote a book called The Secret Destiny of America. And it's just this really encouraging, well, it ties in with the whole theory of it just takes a long time for things to evolve. And he's tracking in the book all the major milestones for humanity as we start becoming more conscious and more aware. And then there's the legend of America. And I'm not going to tell the story here, but there were two power couples at the time. It's Marie and Manly Hall were on the West Coast. And Marie Hall is quite the heroine, trying to move the US trajectory along. And then there were the Russells on the East Coast. And for those who live in Virginia, you know, Walter Russell's castle, they call it Swannanoa Palace, is just an incredible place to visit. And there's now a museum. Walter Russell was a contemporary of I mean, he was a contemporary of Einstein. They've got his letters under glass now. He was a contemporary of Tesla. He supposedly cracked 0-point energy. The government raided Swannanoa Palace as soon as he passed. But the big deal thing with him is he's such a well recorded story, true story of spontaneous enlightenment. So anyway, got the Halls and the Russells. And between these two power couples, who also, by the way, represent the law of gender and perfect balance, we get the story of the secret destiny of America. And it's an exciting story. And it's coming true. And it's a legend that goes all the way back to the Templars and the Dead Sea Scrolls and Queen Elizabeth, the not virgin queen, and on and on and on. It brings it forward all the way through Francis Bacon and the founding of Virginia. And Virginia is a big deal in this.
Virginia is a big deal. Yeah, your book is like a history book as well.
It's a fun legend, and I think it's more than a legend. So yes, the secret destiny of America is that we were meant, and we still can, help lead the world into the fifth spiritual paradigm, this time that's been prophesied, you know, from the Bible, the Revelation to John, all the way through Francis Bacon writing the New Atlantis. I mean, every thinking, thoughtful, beautiful human that's been on this planet in the last, 2,000 years has envisioned this utopia. And maybe we can't build a utopia yet. That would be the sixth paradigm, by the way.
Yes.
But we can build a protopia. We can build a world that works in a pro-social manner for many, many more humans than just the haves, the have-nots. It's time. I mean, it's just time to be egalitarian, to be humanitarian. And frankly, women's rights are human rights. Like, we can't move into the future without women completely assuming equal status. And that means first in the ethereal plane with how we anthropomorphize. If you need to picture it, picture God as genderful, but it also can be genderless because we're sophisticated enough now. Science has brought us to the point where so many people are aware of just viewing God as energy, as an energy source, an all-encompassing energy source. And even the latest science on consciousness is moving in that direction. Panpsychism is in vogue again, and that's a belief that was common during the great Greek era, that mind is not just in this thing I call my skull. Mind is all pervasive. You tap into it partially, and then partially it is in your brain. But that is absolutely back in vogue. And scientists are studying at every major university, and billionaires are putting all their money in it because they want to live forever. So the knowledge that we're both all connected to one another and part of the Godhead ourselves is leading us into the new paradigm. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. It's just, are we going to get there soon enough to not do more damage to ourselves, others, and the planet?
I wish we had time to talk about transhumanism and all of that as well. I know we're running out of time.
Oh yeah,
so
I hit
much.
that. Yeah, we don't want the new human to be artificial intelligence. Yeah, I deal with that in the book too. That's to me the scariest thing facing us. If we hit AI at this level of wisdom, we're screwed.
Right. That's a whole other evening that we could have here. But in the few remaining minutes that we have, maybe just describe the new human for those listening here and for those who are going to listen to this recording, because we want to be clear. of what we mean by that, because there is, again, a lot of maybe misconception about where we're heading, and that we're becoming transhumanists or robots or anti-human or anti-God. Or so when you say new human, in a nutshell, how would you describe that?
I am praying that the following scenario plays out, that the new human is not a machine, that the new human is, Barbara called the species Homo universalis.
Yeah.
And this is a species that has reached such a high level of consciousness and wisdom and compassion and all the virtues that we value, that barbarism is a thing of the past. So a new human acknowledges that, and I say this in the book a couple times because the point needs to be driven home. The spectrum of consciousness is so vast and varied right now. A human is not a human is not a human. We've got barbarians walking the planet with Buddhas. Ken Wilber writes in one of his books, it's an exaggeration, but this really drives the point home. If Buddha were alive today, he'd be a dime a dozen. That's how many people have reached that level of consciousness now. So we've got Buddhas walking the planet with barbarians. I compare it to, in the book, a dog is a dog is a dog, essentially, right? I mean, some breeds are a little smarter, some are a little more loyal, but a human is not a human is not a human. So a new human is someone who has crossed that threshold into understanding interconnectedness, holism, unconditional love, is no longer this abstract notion. These are people who are practicing it. And there are many of us, many, 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 many of us. And it's the fastest growing meme. And the young kids are getting there faster than we did. Like they just skip, like actually there's no leapfrog in the theory, but they zip through these stages so fast that they're kind of like, money? Well, that's not my goal. My goal is to be happy. And my goal is to be in an environment where everyone's happy. So a new human, though still somewhat rare, is becoming, well, it's definitely the trending consciousness on the planet. Absolutely.
And I see Bob is back on, but I see someone put in the chat, they quoted Barbara Marx Hubbard, and I remember her saying this, our crisis is a birth and we are in the birth canal and it's painful. And I think she was right on.
Yeah.
She was very prophetic in saying that when she did.
Well, this, Laura, Gina, this has been a wonderful conversation, wonderful presentation, wonderful conversation. And I'm just, your comment about the new human there seems to be a wonderful capstone. Maybe we could see if others would like to turn your video on. You're welcome to do that. And if you've got a comment or a question quick before we wrap up, we'll definitely make time for it. But, as you were talking, particularly these last couple of rounds of conversation between the two of you, I have this quote that's right here in front of you on my computer all the time. It seems right there. Van Jones quote, "It's in that convergence of spiritual people becoming active and active people becoming spiritual that the hope of humanity now rests." And I just think of that so often in conversations, and particularly this last 10, 15 minutes here, Laura, of young people, of women, was Dobbs really a slap to say that evolution is not always forward, but there's a step back, or it's something to be protected, nurtured, advanced, and not to be taken for granted. And so, both all the facts that you brought us, as well as the perspectives, are just so incredibly powerful. Would others like to join us on screen? And you're welcome to turn your video on and maybe plug in for a moment with Laura. I love a lot of what you've talked about this evening, and I appreciate also the conversation about polarity and the significance of not just sweeping it under the rug or thinking, all is well. We just watched the global, what was it called? The Global Joy Summit, and the movie that was broadcast in the last couple of days is a part of that Mission Joy with Desmond Tutu, and the last time Desmond Tutu and Dalai Lama were together. And their conversation of acknowledgement of the lives they each led personally, and the conflict in that, and the horror and whatnot, and being able to acknowledge polarity, and then live in a state of maybe it's bliss, but I will definitely say it's joy, of how to carry on and be an example for others. So I have a question or two, but I'd love to have others that would like to jump in, chat for a little bit, and see what. Obviously, we're going to have Laura. We're going to have you back. If not sooner, we're going to have you back when Nikki Haley and AOC are running for president against each other, because you're going to need to explain that to us. And maybe before that, we'll need some more lessons as well. Anyone like to jump into the conversation with a question or a comment? We can take an extra 10 minutes or so here, if it's okay with you, Laura. Anyone, you put your hand
So,
up.
Bob, there are some comments. I did change the security so people can turn on their audio and video right now.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
And we do have some comments from Nell Rose Foreman. Incredible. Thank you all. Laura, you are fantastic. And hopefully we can talk soon. And Jennifer Davis, this has been awesome. And I have just really appreciated all the work and how you've consolidated, and how everything you presented is so up to date, so relevant, and sometimes scary. Being at that point, it's kind of, we've got the work to do. What you said.
One question I'll lead with is that early on, when you were talking about helping each other along and the responsibility that we have to help each other along, maybe I'll fumble my words here a little bit, but we've gotten more involved here locally in the last couple of years in the URI, United Religions Initiative, and I've had the chance to experience the distinction between people who are so committed to their faith, to their religion, and finding that common ground for conversation, interaction, and activities. But also, we obviously didn't publish anything about the Dobbs decision on the Facebook page for URI. And so when you talk about helping each other along, those that are perhaps further down a conscious evolutionary path than others might be, or on any given day, we drop forward, we go forward, we drop back. What do you see as practical ways of being able to accomplish that? Not just at a religious level, but at a consciousness level. What is ours to do, in your opinion, to help others?
Well, I think various people are going to be called to various levels of service. Number one, I mean, at a very frontline level, there are people who are homeless, and there are people who are hungry, and there are those who need that level of assistance. I mean, using Maslow's charts, they're not even getting the subsistence level needs met.
Right.
For those who live in a very fundamentalist area like I do, I've learned to pick my battles, but not ever shy from them. I think the worst thing that we can do is not engage with those who believe differently than us. So as long as you are civil and engaging and animated, and your partner in a conversation always knows when you are or not engaged. So I find that I can talk quite easily with fundamentalists, whether they're religious fundamentalists or they're just absolutist, black, white sort of thinking people, because once again, the beauty of the model is once you kind of peg where somebody is, you can go, okay, I'm going to change my language to accommodate this audience. And sometimes you're talking up, right? You're meeting someone at a level of consciousness that it's not intimidating, it's just awe-inspiring, right? So we're all in situations where, depending on who we're talking with, we're going to adopt a slightly different approach. So I see it as very possible, though difficult, to talk with those who view the world in a very old-fashioned way, that still subscribe to what I think now are all ancient religions. If I were talking one-on-one with a fundamentalist Christian, but there is what, like, frankly, knowing the Bible and using it as a starting point is how I approach it. If I'm talking with a fundamentalist, that I know the Bible really well, so I can point to the parts that show inconsistencies, that Paul comes along and Paul says, oh, we're going to lower the bar, forget all those commandments, we're all sinners, and I can go, oh, wait, didn't Jesus say that he said to raise the bar? We call it the 11th commandment in the first book, because he's saying not only should you not do these bad things that are in the 10 commandments, he's saying now you have to do all these good things. Now you have to be affirmatively good, and he raises the bar, and that of course got lost. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying talk to people, and if you have the time, help. Like, get out there and really help. And if you're a teacher, some people are teachers, teach. Yeah, we all have to be activists now for the paradigm shift. We all have to be. And yes, still take your time to meditate and do your own private practice, but no excuse for just focusing on yourself anymore. Zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to
agree.
add to that too, Bob, if I may.
Sure.
How to help each other along, something I've been thinking about a lot the last couple of years, because I'm trying to live as much as I can the paradox, like to not be in that polarity and to listen to all sides. And one of the things I think is really helpful is to just be in your truth, to speak your truth and to do it with love, and compassion, but to not cower and not change who you are based on who you're around. Your truth is your truth. And you arrive at that by thinking for yourself and having your own critical thinking about things. So not just going along with the crowd or the people that you're around, but really stepping back and asking, internally, asking source, and also just, doing your own research, and doing it with an open mind and not some sort of agenda that you have to, prove yourself right or anything like that, but to just, just be curious. Just be curious to see, like, if someone says something that you disagree with, instead of writing it off, just say, well, I wonder why that person thinks that, and and really do your own critical thinking around it, and if relevant, do some research around it. I think that's one of the ways that we can begin to find some common ground.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And while some state legislatures, including one we have in common in Tennessee, are working overtime to go backwards to make sure that there's even less critical thinking or availability of the true history of the country, or the progression of women's rights and anything else, that's the latest example of evolution and a step back. And I appreciate what you're saying about critical thinking. To me, it's not, I can't argue chapter and verse of the Bible with somebody if they're going to start quoting the actual verse and line. So I tend to also frame it back in trying to maintain a conversation, frame it back as a question. Well, what if, or could it be? Or I'm not telling you what I believe, and therefore you're supposed to stop believing what you believe, but rather I'm tossing a question into the conversation between us. And maybe that provokes more conversation, maybe provokes more thought on their part, maybe provokes more thought on my part moving forward. Anyone else like to jump into the conversation for a minute or two? We're going to close out the evening and let you know how to be in contact with Laura and Gina. If not, this has been a wonderful, wonderful time. We are living in an amazing moment. And like Noelle said, thank you, Laura, for being so up to date literally to the day of the things that are going on and their relevance in this journey that we're on, as we hurtle through space on this big blue marble. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to add one thing that this past Tuesday in Bristol, Virginia, the city council there is thinking that they should, there's an abortion clinic that was in Bristol, Tennessee, that moved across the street to Bristol, Virginia. And now the city council is thinking, well, a group has said, they shouldn't be allowed to have any more abortion clinics, and they can't expand. And so a lot of our UU members went there, and were representing the point of view that, you can't be selective like that. That's a discrimination. We're not going to tolerate that. And as my knowledge, they have not made any decision, but it's right in our face all around us.
Yeah.
And, we do our best to stay abreast and motivate ourselves and others to get out there and take action. Let them know.
Yep.
You guys are amazing, all that you do. And I mean, you got the bus caravan. That was just a few months ago. What were you guys doing then?
Oh,
We took the poor people. We
campaign.
took a bus to the poor people's
Yeah.
campaign in DC. Mhm.
Yeah, that was really something.
It was a wonderful day. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Always.
It was really amazing. And what's growing out of that in terms of getting more activists fired up. It's our social justice committee has just doubled, because people have just so wound up wanting to do something, not ignoring and taking action. So that's what lights our fire.
So let's make sure everyone that's on the call this evening knows how to get in touch with you, Gina, and Laura, with you and all the good work of the Oracle Institute and the Peace Pentagon. Let us know what's the best way, if you put it in the chat there, Gina, best way for people to contact you. And Laura, the Oracle Institute has an amazing website with all kinds of branches coming down from it, of the intentional community that's under development right there on the New River that's pictured behind you, and all of the work of the Peace Pentagon. Is that the best way for them to contact you as well?
Yes, just put .org after the Oracle Institute over my head. That's our website. And the community, we're all big lovers of Damanhur. Everybody here, Bob, Noel, Gina, me. So we are patterning to a great extent the Valley of Light on the City of Light, which is Damanhur. It's a model that's just amazing. I liked what you said in the beginning, city of the future. It really is. It really is. They're already in the fifth, they're living in the fifth paradigm.
Yeah.
On a consistent basis. Those 800 people or so who live there. It's a daily reality for them to live like that. And anyway, we want to model it here too. So anybody interested in community, please contact me. You can just put Laura at the Oracle Institute and you'll get me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you one and all for being here this evening.